In the dust-choked plains of Moab, a land far from the fertile valleys of Judah, sorrow had cast a long shadow over the house of Elimelech. His sons, Mahlon and Chilion, had found wives amongst the Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth, their lives intertwined with a people whose customs and gods differed from the covenant of Israel. This union, born of circumstance and perhaps even love, was soon to be tested by the cruel hand of fate. The breadwinners of the household, the men who had brought these women into their lives, were taken, leaving behind a void filled with grief and uncertainty. Naomi, the matriarch, found herself widowed, her sons gone, and her future a bleak landscape of solitude. The familiar rhythms of her life in Bethlehem, the land of her birth and covenant, seemed a distant, unreachable dream. Her daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth, bound to her by marriage and now by shared loss, stood at a precipice, their destinies hanging precariously in the balance. The air in their Moabite home was thick with unspoken anxieties, the weight of their losses pressing down upon them. The land of Moab, though it had offered them refuge from famine, now felt like a gilded cage, its comforts overshadowed by the stark reality of their widowhood. Naomi's heart ached not only for her lost sons but for the perilous path that lay before these two young women, women who had become as dear to her as her own daughters. The covenant of Israel, with its promises and its expectations, was a world away, and the traditions of Moab, though they had welcomed these women, offered no true solace for a soul yearning for the God of Abraham. This was not merely a story of loss, it was a profound exploration of belonging, of the choices that define us when all that is familiar is stripped away, and of the enduring power of a connection that transcends borders and beliefs. The narrative begins not with grand pronouncements, but with the quiet despair of a woman who has lost everything, and the fierce loyalty of two women whose lives are inextricably bound to hers, setting the stage for a journey that would redefine the meaning of family, faith, and divine providence. The silence in the house after the men were gone was a palpable entity, a constant reminder of their absence. Naomi, her spirit weathered but not yet broken, carried the burden of their survival. Her thoughts, however, were not solely on her own plight, but on the futures of Orpah and Ruth. She knew the challenges they faced as widows in a foreign land, the vulnerability that clung to them like the desert dust. Her own longing for the promised land, for the familiar comfort of her people, warred with her deep affection for her daughters-in-law. This internal conflict, this agonizing balance between personal yearning and selfless concern, would become a cornerstone of her journey, mirroring the larger spiritual themes of sacrifice and unwavering commitment that would unfold. The very fabric of their lives had been rent, and the threads of their future were scattered, waiting to be rewoven by choices made in the crucible of despair. The land of Moab, with its pagan altars and different gods, offered no true inheritance for these women, especially not for Naomi, who clung to the memory of the God of Israel. The famine that had driven Elimelech's family from their homeland had been a catalyst, but the true test was yet to come, a test not of survival against scarcity, but of the soul against the overwhelming tide of life's adversities. The story, therefore, opens with a profound sense of vulnerability, not just of physical displacement, but of spiritual and emotional isolation, laying the groundwork for a narrative of remarkable resilience and unexpected grace. It is in these quiet moments of shared grief and uncertain futures that the seeds of extraordinary loyalty and divine purpose are sown, a testament to the fact that even in the deepest valleys of despair, God's plan can begin to unfold in the most unexpected ways, often through the simple, yet profound, bonds of human connection. 3. The parting of ways. As Naomi prepared to return to Bethlehem, her heart heavy with the weight of her losses and the uncertainty of her reception, she urged Orpah and Ruth to return to their own families. She painted a stark picture of her own future, a future of old age, hardship, and loneliness, a future where she could offer them no solace or security, no husbands to provide for them. Her words were laced with the sorrow of a mother, a mother who understood the harsh realities of their world and the limited opportunities available to widowed women, especially foreign widows, in a land that was not their own. She spoke of her own diminished circumstances, her lack of sons to give them, and the potential burden they would become if they followed her into a life of perpetual uncertainty. This was an act of profound love, a selfless desire to release them from what she perceived as a path of further suffering. She knew the customs of her people, the importance of lineage and provision, and in her own state, she could offer none of it. The land of Moab, while it had been their home, was not their heritage, and their own people, their mothers' houses, offered a more tangible hope for remarriage and a secure future. The tears that flowed were not just of grief for the lost men, but for the impending separation from these women who had become like daughters to her. The air was thick with the unspoken emotions of this agonizing farewell, a moment where duty, love, and the harsh realities of life converged. Orpah, after much weeping and protest, finally succumbed to Naomi's plea. She embraced Naomi, her sobs echoing the depth of her sorrow and her love, and then, with a final, lingering look, she turned back towards her own people, her Moabite heritage, her familiar life. It was a decision born of practicality, of the understanding that Naomi's path was one of profound hardship, and that her own future lay in returning to the known, to the possibility of a new beginning within her own culture. Her departure, though heart-wrenching, was a testament to Naomi's persuasive words and the difficult choices that life often demands. For, an unwavering vow, but Ruth, her heart a tapestry woven with threads of deep affection and a burgeoning faith, refused to be swayed. She clung to Naomi, her embrace a silent testament to a bond that had transcended cultural differences and the sorrow of loss. Her response to Naomi's desperate entreaties was not one of defiance, but of profound loyalty and an emerging spiritual conviction. "Do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from you," Ruth pleaded, her voice soft yet resolute, "for where you go I will go, and where you stay I will stay. Your people will be my people and your God my God." This was not merely the sentiment of a grieving daughter-in-law, it was a declaration of allegiance, a spiritual conversion spoken in the rawest moments of human vulnerability. Ruth saw in Naomi not just a mother-in-law, but a beacon of a different way of life, a life guided by a God she was beginning to understand and revere. She recognized that the true home, the true inheritance, was not tied to land or lineage alone, but to a covenant relationship with the God of Israel, a God who had shown kindness to Naomi and her family, even in their suffering. Her words were a profound rejection of her Moabite past and an embrace of an unknown future, a future intertwined with Naomi and the God she served. This unwavering commitment, spoken in the face of Naomi's own despair, was the turning point, the moment when Ruth chose her path, a path that would lead her far from her homeland and into the very heart of God's redemptive plan. Naomi, witnessing this depth of devotion, this profound act of faith, finally ceased her protests, her own tears now mingling with a flicker of hope. She recognized that Ruth's commitment was not a fleeting emotion but a deeply rooted conviction, a choice that would bind their destinies together, a testament to the enduring power of love and the transformative nature of faith. 5. Journey to Bethlehem. Together, the two women, one a seasoned matriarch weathered by loss and the other a young widow forging a new path, embarked on the arduous journey back to Bethlehem. The road was long and unforgiving, a physical manifestation of the challenges that lay ahead. As they traveled, the landscape shifted from the arid plains of Moab to the more verdant, rolling hills of Judah. The air grew cooler, the scent of olive groves and vineyards replacing the dust of their former home. Yet, with each step, the weight of their past losses lingered, a silent companion on their pilgrimage. The return to Bethlehem was met with a mixture of shock and curiosity. The townspeople, recognizing Naomi, were struck by her altered appearance, her emaciated frame, and the absence of her husband and sons. Her sorrow was palpable, etched onto her face, a stark contrast to the woman who had left years before, full of hope and purpose. When asked if this was indeed Naomi, she responded with a poignant declaration. "Do not call me Naomi," she said, using the name that meant pleasantness or joy. "Call me Mara, for the Almighty has made my life bitter. I went out full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has afflicted me and the Almighty has brought misfortune upon me?" Her words painted a vivid picture of her despair, her feeling of abandonment by the very God she had always served. It was a raw and honest expression of her pain, a cry from the depths of her soul. Yet, in the midst of this profound grief, there was Ruth, a constant presence, a quiet strength by Naomi's side. Ruth, the Moabite widow, now stood as a living testament to Naomi's words, a symbol of their shared journey and the difficult circumstances they faced. Her presence was a source of both comfort and a subtle challenge to the town's perception of Naomi's fate, hinting at a narrative of resilience that was only beginning to unfold. Their arrival marked not an end, but a new beginning, a transition into a different phase of their lives, where their faith would be tested and their loyalty would be rewarded in ways they could not yet imagine, all under the watchful eye of a God who, though unseen, was actively weaving his purposes into the fabric of their lives. 6. Gleaning in the fields. In Bethlehem, Naomi and Ruth faced the harsh reality of their destitution. Naomi, stripped of her husband and sons, had nothing. Ruth, with a fierce determination born of her vow, resolved to provide for them. She remembered the laws of the harvest, the provision God had made for the poor and the stranger in Israel. When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not let your vineyards be completely stripped and do not gather the fallen fruit of your vineyards. Leave them for the poor and for the foreigner residing among you. I am the Lord your God. This divine provision offered a glimmer of hope. Ruth, with a humble spirit and a strong back, went out to the fields to glean, following behind the reapers, gathering the stray stalks of grain left behind. It was backbreaking work, often dangerous, and always humbling, a stark contrast to the life she might have known. She found herself in the fields of Boaz, a wealthy landowner, a relative of Naomi's deceased husband, Elimelech. Boaz, a man of integrity and kindness, noticed the young foreign woman diligently working in his fields. He was struck by her diligence, her respectful demeanor, and the fact that she was a stranger, far from her homeland, yet working so hard to provide for her family. 7. The kindness of Boaz. Boaz, moved by compassion and perhaps by a sense of familial duty and divine prompting, inquired about Ruth. When he learned of her unwavering loyalty to Naomi, her willingness to leave her homeland and her gods to follow the God of Israel, he was deeply impressed. He saw in her not just a poor gleaner, but a woman of remarkable character and faith. He instructed his reapers to be intentionally less thorough in their harvesting, to leave larger handfuls of grain for Ruth to gather, and to treat her with respect and kindness. He even commanded them not to molest her, ensuring her safety and dignity. He invited Ruth to stay close to his young women, to drink from the water they drew, and shared his own meal with her, offering her roasted grain. This was an extraordinary act of generosity, far beyond the requirements of the law. Boaz recognized the Spirit of God at work in Ruth's life, her devotion to Naomi and her embrace of the God of Israel. He saw her as more than just a foreigner, he saw her as a woman of virtue and deep faith, a woman worthy of protection and honor. His kindness was a tangible expression of God's provision, a divine intervention in their desperate circumstances. Ruth, overwhelmed by this unexpected grace, bowed low and asked why she had found favor in his eyes, a foreigner. Boaz, in turn, spoke of her kindness to Naomi, her sacrifice in leaving all she knew, and her trust in the Lord. His words offered Ruth not just sustenance, but a sense of belonging and affirmation, a sign that her loyalty and faith had not gone unnoticed. This encounter marked a significant turning point, a moment where divine purpose began to intertwine with human kindness, setting the stage for a future that would bring redemption and blessing, not only to Ruth and Naomi but to the entire lineage of Israel. The fields of Boaz, once merely a place of labor, became a sanctuary, a place where loyalty was recognized and kindness bloomed, foreshadowing a deeper covenant that was about to be forged. Boaz, a man of substance and standing in Bethlehem, observed Ruth's earnest labor with a keen eye, not merely as a landowner witnessing a stranger's toil, but as one discerning the quiet currents of divine favor. His decision to extend extraordinary hospitality wasn't solely rooted in the Mosaic law's provision for the vulnerable, it was a proactive engagement with a spiritual calling he sensed unfolding before him. He saw beyond the immediate act of gleaning. He perceived a woman whose resilience was fueled by a profound, nascent faith, a faith that had led her to abandon her ancestral gods and embrace the God of Israel. Consequently, his instructions to his harvesters were not merely about leaving grain, they were about cultivating an environment of honor and protection, a deliberate shielding of Ruth from the harsh realities and potential indignities that a foreign woman, working alone in the fields, might face. He orchestrated a subtle yet powerful demonstration of covenantal care, ensuring her safety and well-being, thereby safeguarding the integrity of her nascent spiritual journey. Furthermore, Boaz's own lineage connected him to Naomi's late husband, Elimelech, a fact that added a layer of familial obligation to his burgeoning admiration. However, his actions transcended mere duty. He recognized a spiritual resonance in Ruth's story, a narrative of profound sacrifice and unwavering loyalty that mirrored the very principles of covenantal faithfulness he held dear. He saw in her a reflection of the divine commitment that bound Israel to their God, a commitment Ruth had so powerfully articulated in her vow to Naomi. This perception wasn't a passive observation, it spurred him to actively participate in the unfolding of what he sensed was a divinely orchestrated plan. He extended an invitation to Ruth to remain close to his female reapers, a gesture that offered not just companionship but a recognized social buffer, a visible acknowledgement of her presence and worth within the community. Building upon this foundation of respect, Boaz then personally shared his midday meal with Ruth, a significant breach of social custom that elevated her from a mere gleaner to a guest. The offering of roasted grain, a delicacy, was a deliberate act of honor, distinguishing her from any other laborer. This wasn't simply about alleviating hunger, it was about affirming her dignity and acknowledging the sacrifices she had made. Now, consider how this applies when you face situations where societal norms might dictate exclusion or marginalization. Boaz's actions demonstrate the power of intentionally extending grace and recognition, transforming a potentially isolating experience into one of affirmation and belonging. He didn't just offer food, he offered a glimpse of acceptance and value. Conversely, Ruth's response to this unprecedented kindness was one of profound humility and a touch of bewildered gratitude. Her question, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me, a foreigner?" was not a rhetorical flourish but a genuine expression of surprise. She understood the societal hierarchy and the precarious position of a Moabite widow in Judah. Boaz's acknowledgement of her virtue, her loyalty to Naomi, her courageous embrace of the God of Israel, and her seeking refuge under his wings, served as a powerful validation. He articulated that her actions were not merely commendable but aligned with a higher spiritual principle, a testament to the transformative power of faith. This moment underscores the profound impact of being seen and valued, especially when one feels most vulnerable and overlooked. Consequently, Boaz's actions were more than just an act of charity, they were a strategic move, a subtle but significant step toward fulfilling a deeper purpose. By demonstrating such conspicuous favor, he was not only providing for Ruth and Naomi in their immediate need but was also signaling his intention to uphold the covenantal responsibilities that might eventually extend to them. His conspicuous generosity served as a public declaration of acknowledgement, setting the stage for future interactions and potential commitments. This narrative highlights that true benevolence often involves not just meeting immediate needs but actively fostering an environment where individuals can thrive, secure in the knowledge that their worth is recognized and their character honored, especially when they have chosen a path of faith and loyalty. Boaz, now deeply invested in Ruth's welfare, recognized that her immediate needs for sustenance were only a part of a larger, more complex situation. He understood that her loyalty to Naomi, while spiritually commendable, placed them both in a precarious position regarding social standing and future security. The Mosaic Law, which he so meticulously followed, also outlined provisions for kinsmen, specifically the concept of the Goel, or redeemer. This role carried significant responsibilities, including the obligation to redeem land that had been sold by a relative and, crucially, to marry a widow of that relative to perpetuate his name and lineage. Boaz, being a close relative of Elimelech, was therefore in a position to act as this redeemer. This wasn't merely an opportunity for generosity, it was a sacred duty, a thread woven into the very fabric of Israelite society, designed to ensure that no family line would be extinguished and that the inheritance of the land remained within the covenant community. Now, consider how this applies when you encounter situations where established societal structures or legal frameworks offer a path to rectify injustice or secure a vulnerable individual's future. Boaz's contemplation of the Goel role is a prime example. He wasn't just thinking about providing a meal, he was considering the long-term implications of Ruth and Naomi's destitution and how his own position within the community could serve as a mechanism for their restoration. This required a careful assessment of his kinship ties and the legal obligations that accompanied them, a process that demanded both knowledge of tradition and a discerning heart. His contemplation moved beyond the immediate act of kindness to a deeper consideration of systemic provision, a foresight that would ultimately secure their future. Furthermore, Boaz understood that the implementation of the Goel responsibility was not a unilateral decision. While he was willing and able to fulfill this role, there might have been other kinsmen with a closer claim. The law stipulated that the closest relative had the first right to act as redeemer. Therefore, Boaz's next step was not to immediately claim Ruth, but to strategically navigate the legal and social landscape of Bethlehem. He needed to ascertain if any other kinsmen held a prior claim and, if so, to offer them the opportunity to exercise their right. This involved a public declaration, a gathering of elders at the city gate, the traditional place for such legal proceedings and significant community announcements. Conversely, Ruth's role in this unfolding drama was one of patient faith, not passive helplessness. While Boaz was strategizing and consulting legal and social avenues, Ruth continued her diligent gleaning, her actions a quiet testament to her enduring commitment. Her presence in Boaz's fields, her respectful demeanor, and her continued diligence served as a constant, visible reminder of her situation and her character. She was, in essence, presenting herself through her actions, allowing her steadfastness and her loyalty to speak for themselves. This demonstrates a powerful principle: even when actively seeking a resolution or awaiting a divine intervention, maintaining integrity and continuing to fulfill one's current responsibilities is crucial. Her consistent effort underscored the sincerity of her vow and the genuine need for the Goel's intervention. Another crucial layer to this part of the narrative involves the understanding that Boaz's actions were not solely driven by legal obligation or even pure altruism. They were deeply intertwined with his faith. He saw Ruth as a woman who had sought refuge under the wings of the Lord, the God of Israel. This act of spiritual alignment was, for Boaz, a significant factor. It meant that by redeeming Ruth, he was not merely helping a destitute widow and her mother-in-law, He was also, in a sense, bringing a woman who had chosen Israel's God into the covenantal fold, perpetuating a lineage that would honor him. This spiritual dimension elevated his actions from a mere legal transaction to a profoundly God-honoring endeavor, demonstrating how faith can imbue even societal obligations with divine purpose and eternal significance. The integrity with which Boaz approached this situation, acknowledging both the legal and spiritual ramifications, set a high standard for righteous living and covenantal faithfulness. Boaz, now deeply aware of Ruth's unique situation and his potential role as Goel, began to methodically prepare for the public affirmation of his intentions. His actions transcended mere legal obligation, they were imbued with a profound understanding of covenantal responsibility that extended beyond the immediate to the perpetual. He recognized that the act of redemption was not solely about acquiring property or securing a wife, but about upholding the integrity of family lines and ensuring the continuity of God's promises within the community of Israel. This required a careful, public process, one that honored both the law and the spirit of communal accountability. Now, consider how this applies when you are faced with situations that demand transparency and communal involvement to validate a significant decision, especially one that impacts the future of others. Boaz's approach illustrates the importance of bringing matters of deep consequence into the light, allowing for communal witness and affirmation, thereby solidifying the legitimacy and sacredness of the undertaking. He proceeded to the city gate, the established locus for significant legal transactions and public pronouncements in Bethlehem. This was not a private negotiation but a formal assembly where the elders, the pillars of the community, would convene. His purpose was to present the matter of Elimelech's estate and the associated obligation to redeem both the land and, by extension, the lineage through marriage to Elimelech's widowed daughter-in-law, Ruth. This deliberate public forum ensured that any potential claims or objections from other eligible kinsmen would be openly addressed, upholding the principle of fairness and preventing future disputes. He understood that the weight of the Goel role demanded not just personal conviction but communal endorsement, lending an unassailable authority to the proceedings. Conversely, Ruth, while aware of Boaz's intervention, remained anchored in her role as a diligent gleaner. Her continued presence in the fields, her quiet perseverance, served as a constant, visible testament to her character and her unwavering commitment to Naomi. She wasn't actively campaigning for her future, rather, her consistent actions spoke volumes, demonstrating her worthiness and her deep-seated loyalty. This illustrates a powerful dynamic. While external forces and legal frameworks are crucial for resolution, the internal disposition and consistent conduct of the individual seeking that resolution are equally significant. Ruth's quiet dignity and steadfastness provided Boaz with tangible evidence of the virtuous character he was seeking to honor and integrate into his own family line. Furthermore, the narrative introduces a crucial nuance, the spiritual dimension of Boaz's intention. His decision to act as Goel was not solely driven by legal precedent or familial obligation. He had witnessed Ruth's profound declaration of faith, her commitment to the God of Israel, and her seeking refuge under his wings. This spiritual alignment was paramount. For Boaz, to redeem Ruth was not merely an earthly transaction, it was an act that aligned with divine purpose, bringing a soul who had chosen the covenant community into its very fabric. This elevated his actions beyond a mere legal maneuver to a sacred duty, reflecting a deep understanding that covenantal blessings were intertwined with faithfulness to God. This perspective highlights how personal faith can infuse even societal obligations with a higher calling, transforming mundane duties into acts of divine significance. The elders at the gate, therefore, were not just witnessing a legal proceeding, they were observing a community member actively participating in a divinely sanctioned process of restoration and continuation. Reflecting on this unfolding narrative, one can discern a subtle yet powerful convergence of themes, much like disparate streams finding their way to a singular, broader river. The initial currents of loss and displacement, so palpable at the story's outset, have gradually been joined by the strengthening flow of unwavering devotion and courageous choice. These are not isolated events but interconnected elements, each influencing the other, shaping a destiny far grander than any individual could have conceived. The very fabric of societal expectation, once a seemingly rigid structure, has begun to yield, revealing the potential for profound transformation when met with steadfast integrity and a spirit open to divine guidance. The echoes of personal sacrifice resonate with the broader implications of communal responsibility, suggesting that the well-being of the individual is inextricably linked to the health and faithfulness of the collective. As we pivot towards the final reflection, consider how the threads of loyalty, hardship, and unexpected grace have interwoven, creating a tapestry whose intricate patterns speak of resilience and a purpose that transcends immediate circumstances. The journey thus far has illuminated the quiet power of commitment, the unexpected blessings found in the most unlikely of places, and the profound ways in which human actions, when aligned with a deeper calling, can become conduits for something far greater than themselves. The narrative has moved beyond the individual struggles, hinting at a larger design, a subtle unfolding of providence that promises a resolution rooted in faithfulness and a legacy that reaches far beyond the immediate horizon. The echoes of Moab and the dust of Bethlehem are beginning to coalesce, not into a memory of sorrow, but into the foundation of a future yet to be fully revealed, a future where the seemingly insignificant choices of individuals ripple outwards, shaping the course of generations. The cumulative effect of these interwoven elements suggests a narrative arc that is not merely about overcoming adversity, but about embracing a destiny that is both deeply personal and cosmically significant, preparing the way for an understanding of how steadfastness and divine favor can redefine the very essence of belonging and inheritance. The path forward, though not yet fully illuminated, is clearly being forged by the convergence of these potent forces. The city gate, a place of ancient pronouncements and communal decisions, bore witness to Boaz's courageous affirmation. Before the gathered elders and the watchful eyes of Bethlehem, he publicly declared his intention to act as Goel, Redeemer. He acknowledged the land that belonged to Elimelech's line, but more significantly, he embraced the profound responsibility that came with it, to marry Ruth, the Moabite widow, and by doing so, to perpetuate Elimelech's name and heritage. This was not merely a legal transaction, it was a covenantal act, a deliberate weaving of Ruth's destiny into the fabric of Israel. The elders, recognizing the righteousness of his intentions and the faithfulness of his actions, blessed their union, their voices echoing the hope for a future built on loyalty and divine favor. This public acceptance, this communal validation, solidified Ruth's place not as an outsider, but as an integral part of the lineage, her sacrifice and devotion finding their rightful recognition. In the quiet aftermath of this momentous decision, a new chapter began. Ruth, no longer defined by her widowhood or her foreign origins, found herself not just accepted, but cherished. Her union with Boaz was blessed with a son, Obed, a child who would become a bridge between worlds, a symbol of redemption and continuity. Naomi, her heart once heavy with bitterness and loss, now experienced a profound sense of fulfillment. Her lament for her lost sons was transformed into a song of praise for the grandson who would carry on the family name, a testament to God's faithfulness even in the face of overwhelming sorrow. The bitterness of Mara had truly yielded to the sweetness of Naomi, not because her circumstances had erased her past pain, but because God's redemptive grace had woven a new narrative of joy and purpose into her life. This was the ultimate reward, a transformation that extended far beyond material provision, touching the very core of her being. The story of Ruth and Naomi, therefore, transcends a simple tale of loyalty and perseverance. It is a profound testament to the overarching narrative of divine purpose that underpins human lives, even those marked by hardship and displacement. Ruth's unwavering commitment to Naomi and her courageous embrace of Israel's God were not merely acts of personal devotion, they were pivotal moments that positioned her within God's grand design. Her willingness to leave all that was familiar, her homeland, her gods, her past, and to place her trust in the God of Israel, set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately lead to the lineage of kings and, ultimately, to the Messiah. This narrative reveals that true belonging is not solely determined by birth or origin, but by faithfulness and a willingness to embrace God's covenant, even when the path is uncertain and fraught with challenges. The enduring impact of their story lies in its powerful illustration of how God can weave even the most unlikely threads into a tapestry of redemption. Ruth, the Moabite stranger, became an ancestor of David, a foundational figure in Israel's history, her legacy etched into the very lineage of the promised Savior. This underscores a timeless truth, that God's grace is expansive, His purposes far-reaching, and His ability to redeem and elevate the marginalized is boundless. It calls us to reflect on our own lives, on the moments of loss and uncertainty, and to recognize that within these very spaces, God may be quietly at work, orchestrating a future of profound blessing and eternal significance. The true practice begins now, to live with the same spirit of unwavering loyalty, courageous faith, and open hearts, trusting that even in our deepest valleys, God is preparing a harvest of unforeseen joy and purpose, weaving our stories into His eternal narrative.